Well, good morning and welcome to a slightly different weekly word this week. I had a realization revelation even, that I won't be able to get to the video on Tuesday, which is when I normally do them. So I didn't want to miss 2 weeks in a row, so figured what better time to do it other than on my way to church. This cloudy but maybe fine a bit later Sunday morning, North Brisbane, Australia. So I have the Telecaster in the back. For those of you musical people, you'll know what I'm talking about. That is the worship weapon of choice this week. And it would be a little bit remiss of me to not introduce myself. So, my name is Steve, and welcome to Christianity Out Loud's slightly different weekly word this week. Reading a number of articles this week about a number of different topics, and as I said on the post, the social media stuff last week, even though I didn't get to a video, there is no shortage of things that I could be talking about this week. But something just struck me at a very early hour of this morning as I was not sleeping, or between sleep cycles or whatever it was. I flipped on my phone to check the time, and it was 3 o'clock or something like that. And one of the other people I follow on a social media site, platform rather than site, one of the ones that is linked below all of these videos, had something about an Australian advertising or television production company, something like that, had started on the grooming of children through their particular advertising. And this is something I've mentioned before on this channel. You can go back and have a look, either on YouTube or Rumble, or go to the website christianityoutloud.com.au. You can find all of the videos and podcasts, articles, information there. But I thought, this is something that I've mentioned, and I've mentioned it before from the sense that what tends to happen here in Australia is, for some reason, and this is no disrespect to my American friends, is that Australian education, for some reason, has tacked on to American education. And most of what we do over here educationally, if that's a word, it is now, is American, or has American origins. We've run through art and science of teaching, we've run through dimensions of learning, we've been doing those for as long as I can remember, for as long as I've been in the industry, the education industry, in and around that profession. And all of that is fine, but for all of the other trends that tend to follow. And I've been watching very closely for the introduction of ideas like critical race, or critical theory in general, really. You can apply anything into the middle of that. Critical feminist theory, critical race theory, critical whatever theory. And another fairly prominent podcast host that I follow has a great acronym. He calls it Critical Race Applied Principles, and I'll let you figure out what that acronym stands for, and I would say he's pretty well bang on as far as that's concerned. But that aside, I've been waiting for those sorts of ideas to start to come in. And I think it was last year, when I went 2022, so 2021 it would have been last year, health safety modules that we have to complete. I don't necessarily have a problem with them, but working in a Christian school, one of the examples given to us was a child is starting to experience or feel that they are experiencing issues with their gender identity. So what do we do with that? And the answers, the correct answers according to the module, mind you, this is put together by a Christian schooling organisation, was essentially affirm the child. And a colleague of mine took issue to it. I'll be honest, I was a bit slack and didn't think much of it at the time. Just sort of tick the box and complete the module. But he took, not issue with it, but he raised it with the principal and said, but this is actually not the correct answer according to our biblical worldview. And to give the principal some credit, he said, yes, I agree, maybe we have to look at how we do our training through in future years. I just thought, isn't it interesting that these sorts of ideas that you would think of, they'll never occur here in Australia, slowly start to infiltrate. And, you know, I was just again thinking when I read the headline of this podcast that said something along the lines of Australian television production starts grooming children. And I fully admit I haven't had a lot of time, being that I only read it very early this morning. I haven't had time to go and have a read or have a listen to see just how accurate that is, whether that's misrepresented. I wouldn't think so, knowing who it's from, but I haven't had time to fact check, as they like to say. But I just thought, isn't it interesting? There we go. So, really the Australian trend of following foreign ideologies, I guess you'd say. Follow trends, probably is a better word. The following of trends that start overseas start to slowly infiltrate the Australian education systems. And I've mentioned the Victorian education system a few times. I'm, on the one hand, grateful that I don't have to work in that particular system. On the other hand, I think I would relish the challenge of working in that system, because I would be saying no to a lot of people a lot of the time, probably at great risk to my job. But how parents don't have to be informed of anything. A child wishes to change their gender, the parent doesn't need to be informed of that. Those sorts of things that are infiltrating the Victorian system, all in the name of those wonderful words of diversity, tolerance. And it was only, I think, yesterday when I read a headline again from someone who I follow and said, a 6-year-old boy has decided that he's a 6-year-old girl, and therefore he has made the decision to undergo transitionary surgery. And I could get angry because it makes me angry, not the child, but the adult influences in that child's life. I look at that and I go, what are the parents doing? Lest I sit here judging someone else's circumstances, which is not my intention. But what 6-year-old have you known to make a sound decision regarding anything? And in what world is it acceptable that a 6-year-old can make a life-altering, irreversible decision like this. It's not just the parents. Where's the psychologist? Where's the doctors? Where are the other medical professionals in this young boy's life? How at 6, when, a decision like what t-shirt to wear can change half an hour after waking up and getting dressed. How can a 6-year-old be entrusted with making such a decision? It breaks my heart, actually. It really does. Because who knows what other issues this young boy is going to experience now, all thanks to a decision, an ill-advised decision. And I think it is about time that we as Christians stand up for this. I mean, the language is starting to change here in Australia. I mentioned the abortion issues before. Queensland's abortion laws are just disgraceful. If a child is born alive, you don't, during an abortive procedure, we don't provide medical care or life supportive care. We let the child die. South Australia now has phone-in abortions, so you can phone up. Excuse me, I'm 6 months pregnant, I would like an abortion. They will go, certainly. They won't even say ma'am, because this is great news for women and pregnant people, according to South Australian health officials. And I really just, I'm getting very tired of the corporate church just sitting on their hands. I'll include me in that, sitting on our hands and just doing nothing. Why is there not a Christian church-based outcry for this 6-year-old boy that's transitioning, going to transition? Why is there not letters being written to the local members here, state members in Queensland, regarding our abortion laws? I realise that this idea of separation of church and state is a great idea in theory. Well, a great idea. I'll use that word great with inverted commas. Is it such a good idea? I don't think it is. I mean, separation of church and state, okay, look where that's got us. 6-year-olds are transitioning. We're not giving life supportive care to babies who are born alive during abortive procedures. South Australia can mail phone-in abortions. The Bible tells us, the Bible commands us to be in the world, but not of the world. In the world, as my stereo turns off, in the world, but not of the world. Are we in the world at the moment? And that's sort of the where my thoughts have been, is, are we actually in the world? I mean, look at what's going on, and where are the objections to these things, these ideologies, these thoughts? We don't need to be of the world. Okay, we are called to be set apart. We have to be set apart. We have to be an example. But if you've looked around, where do we live? We live in the world. So we live in and among this. And I'm not sure that the time to be quiet is here any longer. There was an article I read yesterday, I think it was, stating that most Australians, and of course it's a survey and, or a poll, you take them for what they are, but it was suggesting that most Australians don't really support the idea of backing a religious discrimination bill in its current format, that most Australians would rather see the LGBTQ, etc. community protected by anti-discrimination laws than Christians and Christian organisations. And if you're on the fence about that, what this means, and again, good old Victoria, trying very hard to do that, is to remove the ability for, say, a faith-based school to hire staff based on their ideologies. So in other words, having something in an employment contract that says, in order to work here, you must be a practicing Christian, you must be attending church regularly, you must be a part of a Christian community. That's going to be removed if the Victorians have their way. Sorry, the Victorian government. I shouldn't lump Victorians in with that. If the Victorian government has their way. So what that will mean is all of these other quotas that are being applied to secular organisations will be applied to Christian organisations. And if we're not of the world, but if we're not in the world, then this is the world that we end up with. And I'm not sure that's the world that Jesus would have wanted, and I'm not sure this is the approach of silence and apathy is the one that he would have wanted either. So, just my thoughts as I drove to church this morning. Why don't you like and subscribe? Jump over, have a look at the website, go buy a copy of the book, check out some merchandise, all of that, and support what I'm trying to do here, which is keep the Christian voice really in the public sphere. So, until next week, God bless.